Lamar Jackson has responded to his critics, namely Julian Edelman. We talk about what he said and so much more coming up next here on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for tuning in today, making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day and a part of your day in general here on this Saturday. Bonus episode edition of the show, free and available on all podcasting platforms. It includes an audio form. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the whole 9 yards. Also in video form on YouTube. You can like and subscribe to the channel here for you 5 days per week, plus bonus episodes like today of daily Ravens coverage. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. It's game day. The Ravens take on the Packers in preseason week number 3, the finale. Roster cutdown day is on Tuesday. We are moving right along as we get closer and closer to the NFL regular season, which is crazy that we're 2 weeks away. Well, now even less than 2 weeks away. But I guess this will be a bit of a test run for what we have planned here on Locked On Ravens for the regular season. We are going to be doing game day episodes, so those will come out at 6 a.m., our regularly scheduled time. And I wasn't planning on doing any for the preseason, but a storyline popped up yesterday that we had to talk about it. So this isn't meant as a game day episode. Obviously, it falls on a game day, so it technically will be. But the big storyline is Julian Edelman got responded to by Lamar Jackson. Lamar went on Mad Dog Radio and talked with Adam Shine and responded. He was asked about the critics and he responded to the critics. So we're going to be talking about what Lamar Jackson said, dive a little bit more into the criticism itself and just where those narratives come from and will they ever go away. Then the second part of the show, a big topic of conversation again was the joint practices that the Ravens had with the Packers on Thursday, that one practice, and people still talking about it on Friday. So I'm just going to do a wrap up segment, right? We'll talk about it and then we'll be done. Then we'll move on because I still think people are a little panicked by it. So I do want to put some more things in context, both good and bad, And finally, we'll talk about some preseason standouts as we do get ready for the preseason game here against the Packers. If you're tuning in after the preseason game, you can check out that final episode to hear about some of my predictions for the game to see if I was right or wrong. One of the guys who I thought really impressed me over the first 2 weeks of the preseason. But let's get into it. Lamar Jackson responds to his critics, responds to Julian Edelman. He was asked by Adam Shine on Mad Dog Radio about the criticism, what he would say, what his response would be. And it was definitely a strong response, but not necessarily one where you're looking at it and you're like, oh, well, he buried this guy. But I think that he had a very strong response to Julian Edelman and ended up saying, Mr. Adam, at the end of the response, which again speaks to the politeness of Lamar and just who he is. But Lamar ended up saying, quote, I'm motivating myself because I know what I want to do. Those guys had their time. I really don't care what the criticism is. They can believe what they want to believe, but we know what we want. And that was kind of the message throughout the entire conversation here for Lamar, and the entire answer of Lamar is, the Ravens have their goals. Lamar has his goals, but he also mentioned that no one criticizes them harder than they do. Nobody criticizes the Ravens like they do themselves, right? Nobody holds them to higher standards than what they hold themselves to. That was another theme throughout Lamar's answer too, where, he also mentioned, well, they got farther than they've ever gotten, right? That was their first AFC championship game. It was in the Lamar era. So they got further than where they ever were. And that to me, and I've said this, right? I've been pretty consistent in saying this. If you're an everyday, but that's growth. That is growth. And I'm a big proponent on growth and just, not flaming out in the wild card round every year, not losing for the one seed in the divisional. They took care of business against Houston and they went on to Kansas City And obviously Kansas City came to Baltimore, I guess, right? But they lost. Baltimore did. And they just got to keep going. You're right. Lamar said, quote, "We're getting closer. I'll say that. We just got to keep going." But we know that, look, the Ravens keep tabs on the criticism, right? They know it's there. Obviously, the most prevalent example of that was the San Francisco 49ers game on Christmas. We know that the Mike Flores stuff, Lamar kept pretty close tabs on that. And we know that. We know that he was very caught up with that criticism and all of the narratives surrounding him with that. But they don't let it affect them to the point where it's like, where it's detrimental, I guess, where it's like, oh, the only thing we're trying to do is prove the criticism wrong. No, they don't. The Ravens have never been a team to really talk about the outside noise, to really factor in the outside noise. They know it's there. I'm sure they talk about it, but they're not ones to say, all right, here we go. This is what we're playing for. And it's a picture of Skip Bayless on the wall. That's not what it's ever been for them. But Lamar's saying, oh yeah, well, you know what? They had their time. That is direct response. That is a direct response to Julian Edelman. You know, he doesn't care. And I really don't think he does. You know, a lot of these guys don't, I feel like, but for Lamar, there's such a loud conversation around him. And there are all these narratives where, look, I think every quarterback, even every player in the league, has a certain narrative that can be formed about them and has been formed about them. But for Lamar's, it's just so much louder than a lot of other guys. You know, I'm not saying that there aren't players who don't get loud criticism like Lamar does, but I do think it's a little different where Lamar's mistakes are magnified. I've said that many, many times on this show and across other platforms as well. But he said, you know what? They can believe what they want to believe, you know? And Lamar, even in the whole Mike Florio stuff, when that happened, he kind of alluded to in his post-game press conference, he's like, you know, that stuff doesn't matter, like da-da-da. But he said it was a level line of disrespectful. And obviously, he doesn't believe Julian Edelman crossed that, at least based off of his answer. He doesn't believe that. Maybe he does in a private setting, who knows? But the whole thing with Florio was massively disrespectful to the Ravens. And that's why he and the team took it so I think that was the most personal I've ever seen Lamar take criticism at the NFL level for one particular event, I guess. But, you know, Julian Edelman did have his time. There's been a lot of conversation about Julian Edelman in recent days about, you know what, he's made by Tom Brady, and where would Julian Edelman be without Tom Brady? For those who don't know, the Julian Edelman criticism was he was asked who was going to be a team in the AFC that could take down the Chiefs, right? Will the Chiefs three-peat? Could there be a team that takes them down? Edelman picked the Chiefs to three-peat, but talked about some of the other guys in the AFC, other teams in the AFC that could maybe take them down if there was a shot at it. And mentioned the Bengals and Joe Burrow and this, that, and the other. And then mentioned Lamar and said, you know, Lamar has been on a milk carton in the playoffs. He's missing. And, you know, I think there are other ways to get that point across. Like, obviously, I'm not going to sit here, and I haven't. I'm not going to sit here and defend Lamar's playoffs and say he's been great in the playoffs for his entire career. There's nothing to, you know, what is he talking about? Obviously, there's room for improvement, plenty of it with Lamar Jackson in the playoffs. But he understands that, right? It's not like any level of criticism is going to make a light bulb go off in Lamar's head that's like, oh, wow, maybe I haven't been performing that well. But, you know, maybe I have to play better. Lamar knows he has to play better. It's not like this is a light bulb moment where Lamar's like, oh, now it makes sense because Julian Edelman said it. Oh, now this makes sense because Skip Bayless or Nick Wright or whoever we want to talk about said this. And the other part is the other narratives that are made up. Some of them are just so out of left field, so ridiculous that, you know, like it gets national attention, it gets traction and whatnot, you know. I'll mention them here and there, but it's not like Lamar sees those and are like, you know, Lamar is outside of the top 20 in the NFL, for example, from Nick Wright. And Lamar's sitting there going, oh, yeah. Well, I'm sure that there is some level of attention that the Ravens pay criticism, but they're not letting it impact their day-to-day. They're not letting it impact their operations. They're not letting it impact their play. They go out there and do what they do. Lamar made it very clear in his answer that is the case, and I believe him. I do believe him. I believe that the Ravens know what they want. They want to win a Super Bowl. There was growth. That is a fact. It was disappointing based off how they lost in their season, but there was growth. And I've been saying that for months where, the season came to a crashing, it was crashed down. It was awful. But they did advance further than they had. But Lamar does motivate himself. And he's motivated by his teammates. He's motivated for the people he wants to win for. Obviously, he wants to win for himself, but we've known that he wants to win for his teammates. He wants to win for his coaching staff, etc. That's also what motivates Lamar. So, again, people will talk about him, right? He's a popular guy, popular figure, gets talked about a lot, but he's done a great job over the course of his career of generally drowning out the criticism, and I do expect that to continue with his answer. Coming up, though, in the second part of the show, we're going to be talking a bit more about the joint practices, plus finishing off our conversation about Lamar Jackson and his criticism. Stay tuned. A lot to get to on this bonus episode of Locked On Ravens. First, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. For me, for a lot of other people, there are self-care non-negotiables. Maybe you never skip leg day or therapy day, or new schedules packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more. It's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. And therapy has so many different benefits, from learning positive coping skills, how to set boundaries. It can empower you to become the best version of yourself. And it isn't just for those who've experienced major trauma. It's for everyone. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. We return our second segment of this bonus episode of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here on this Saturday. We talked about Lamar Jackson and his comments towards Julian Edelman and his critics, sending a pretty strong message, right? Kind of laying it out for people that, I don't care what you say. I motivate myself. We know what we want. Yeah, that's he's standing on that right now. Also, by the way, happy game day. It is game day between the Ravens and Packers, preseason week 3. If you're tuning in before the game, we will have some talk about the preseason in the final part of the show. If you're tuning in after the game, be sure to check out that conversation to see how right or wrong I was, and also to hear my preseason standouts overall. We have a lot is planned for these next couple of days. Obviously, we're going to go live after the game, directly after the game today on Locked On Ravens here on YouTube. So if you want to be in that live chat, be sure to like, subscribe, turn notifications on YouTube. Or if you just want to listen after, we have it available in the playback on YouTube, or obviously in audio form as well. It will be up. We're going to have a bonus episode tomorrow as well, talking about final preseason standouts, preseason stock report. That will be the final preseason thing. Then on Monday, I'll have my final roster prediction out. I'll do that whole roster prediction on Monday, and it's my first and only roster prediction I've done, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Then Tuesday's cut down day. We'll have a 6 a.m. episode discussing what the roster could look like, and then later on Tuesday, when the roster is announced, we'll be going live instantly to react to the final roster, cuts, etc. So major stuff coming up these next couple of days. Really appreciate everybody for rocking out with me still here on the show. Now let's finish our conversation about Lamar Jackson, someone who made it very clear he does not care about the criticism. He's going to do things his way. That's always been his MO, first of all. But I think it was, it was good for Lamar to kind of, I don't want to say get it off his chest. I mean, I don't know if he's been holding anything in like that, but I do think it was nice for him to be able to say, hey, you know what? I don't care, man. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm glad Lamar was able to say that. Will people stop criticizing him because of it? Obviously not. Like, everybody gets criticized. Lamar knows it. A quarterback of his stature, how good he is, there are always going to be haters. There's always going to be criticism. He's been dealing with it since high school. But, it just kind of is what it is. I think the former player aspect is a little interesting thing because, now the former player thing is there. And Lamar's like, oh, okay, well, those guys had their time. They had their time. Lamar's like, but it's me now. I'm here now. This is my time now. So that's a big thing. But Lamar was also asked by Adam Shine, again, on Mad Dog Sports Radio, about the offense, surrounding talent around him. He said, quote, when they got their eyes on those guys, I'll just do my thing. And when they focus on me, I'll just let those guys eat. It's going to be a pick your poison offense, I believe. Obviously, mentioned Derrick Henry, Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, et cetera, et cetera. It will be. I think it will be. Because either way, regardless of how you slice it with this offense, if Derrick Henry is just balling out against you, you got to focus on him. Lamar will have added opportunities. The pass catcher will have added opportunities. If Lamar is doing stuff with his legs and he's running all over the defense, well, then you have Derrick Henry who can hand the ball off too. You can work play action off of that. I do believe that it will be a pick your poison type of deal, type of offense, and guys just have to stay healthy and do their job. That to me is the really, really big part here, because if you don't have the health, I mean, you're reaching pretty deep into that depth bag this season. Odell is gone. You don't have that double veteran presence of him and Nelson Aguilar. It's just Nelson Aguilar. So Nelson obviously's got that promotion of the wide receiver 3 role. It's going to be interesting. I think the Ravens have a bunch of offensive talent, a plethora of it, but I think the biggest concern point is the offensive line. And talking about joint practices, that was one of the big contention points of the practice. Is the Packers front apparently got a lot of pressure on Lamar Jackson, was beating the offensive line. Hey, it wasn't all negative, though. Roger Rosengarten had a solid rep against Rashawn Gary, who was one of the better premier pass rushers in this league. But generally, overall, felt like a really tough day for the Ravens offensive line. Obviously, there were a lot of Packers reporters out there, a couple of Ravens reporters as well, and it seemed like both sides were talking about how the Packers defensive front was doing work and Lamar Jackson was under pressure. And the big line of the day was from a Packers reporter saying Lamar Jackson's running for his life and not by design. So, we got word that Patrick McCary was the first tackle out there at right tackle. Rosengarten, I believe, got a lot of work with the second stringers. Nick Zamek, who we now know from John Harbaugh was getting reps at center with the first team. He was getting reps with the first team again against the Packers with Tyler Linderbaum still out, which, again, I do want to make it clear that the offensive line is worse without Tyler Linderbaum, and he wasn't there. But it is a practice. It is a practice. I just think the concerning part for people is there were all these reports, and look, both good and bad for the Ravens. I called it mixed results, talking about it both on Thursday and yesterday, where the Ravens didn't have, this perfect practice, far from it, but the Packers didn't either, right? Roquan had a couple of big plays. Trenton Simpson had a couple big plays. Lamar, Malik Cunningham, Zay Flowers, Isaiah Likely, a lot of people. Nate Wiggins had a rough one and a couple of good ones. Darius Washington had a good play. I mean, there were multiple big plays by the Ravens, multiple big plays by the Packers. Now, based off of all of the tweets, reports, articles, whatever it may be, seems like the Packers probably won today. Right? John Harbaugh had a kind of a different message where he's like, I think his message of it was a great day of practice. I believe him. I believe him when he says it was a great day of practice. Even if the practice didn't go well, a great day of practice to me does not necessarily get defined by, one team won, one team lost. A great day of practice to me is kind of defined by, did you get what you wanted to see in there? Were there things that you wanted to see? Were there things you could improve upon? It's not necessarily performance-based. Now, he did say he was pleased with about 90% of what the offensive line did, the pocket and whatnot. I mean, I'm sure that he has his reasons. I don't necessarily, look, I wasn't there, obviously, and a lot of people weren't from the Baltimore side of things. But all the reports coming out were that the Ravens' offensive line really struggled, and the Packers' defensive front was incredible. So if John Harbaugh had a set goal in mind, then okay. But if there wasn't, then I don't have an answer for that one personally. But it is a practice. And I'm not going to sit here and just hit the panic button over and over again about a practice. I do think there are concerning trends, and I'm not saying they're not, right? The offensive line I am concerned about. I'm a little worried about it. Doesn't mean that by week 4, I'm not going to be sitting here and saying, no, this is great. This is awesome. But I think 4 of your 5 spots are set. I've said this over and over again. 4 of your 5 spots are set with left tackle, left guard, center, and right tackle. But, that right guard spot just has so much uncertainty. Is it going to be Falele? If it's not Falele, is it going to be Cleveland? If it was Cleveland the whole time, why wasn't he getting reps earlier on in the preseason? That's something that's going to be asked. Well, we see today, and again, if you're watching this before the game, we don't know what the offensive line combination is going to look like and what the split's going to be. But, I wonder, is Ben Cleveland going to get the start at guard? Is he not? I would predict, and here's my first prediction. So if you watch the game, you're coming here to watch this show, you can tell me how right or wrong I was. I predict Ben Cleveland starts this game. I do. Wouldn't be shocked if Lele does and Cleveland gets the majority of the reps after that. But I'm going to predict Cleveland starts the game. Samek gets to start at center, and then they kind of work in that way. Could be the other way around, 100%. Wouldn't be shocked. But that's kind of where I'm going with that one. I know there were other concerns about Jordan Love, 4 touchdowns inside the 10-yard line on 4 passes, I believe it was. The Ravens offense had some good moments in 2-minute drills, but the defense actually held the Packers in 2-minute drills to 3 field goals. So again, you'll take that Ravens bend, don't break mentality. But there were, Brandon Stevens got beat, Wiggins got beat, as I talked about as well. There were other guys who had bad days. So I think that's kind of where people are taken away. But it was good and bad. It was mixed results according to everybody. The Ravens had their moments, the Packers had their moments, and that is why I think that Harbaugh said, yeah, it was a successful day of practice, a great day of practice. 2 good teams going up against each other. By the way, the Packers, they are no slouches. They're not. They're going to be a good team this season, especially with Jordan Love at the helm. And, man, I'm really anticipating that, the Ravens and Packers will both benefit from it. But this was the starters preseason, and that's the big part of it, where the starters, I'd be shocked if the starters played in the preseason today. Like, I would be. So the joint practice was the starters preseason, and you got a lot of good working against the team that is going to be good this season, in my opinion. But, of course, that does come with positives and negatives. Coming up on the final part of the show, talk about some preseason standouts and also a little bit of what to expect in this Green Bay game today. And we'll have things for both people who are listening and watching before and after the game. Stay tuned, plenty to talk about here on the show. First, the show is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And for me, I've had a ton of great experiences over on LinkedIn, finding jobs, networking, connecting. LinkedIn has it all. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps hire professionals you can't find anywhere else. Even those who aren't actively searching for a new job might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit our leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 82% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like professional on LinkedIn, plus 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Push a job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to push a job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We're back. Our final segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Saturday bonus episode. Again, I appreciate everybody for being here today and making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen each and every single day as well. We're a 5-day-a-week Ravens podcast that also does bonus content, live episodes. We have so much Ravens content that we have coming up for the season. So if you're an everyday, I really appreciate you for tuning in every single day. Your support does not go unnoticed. If you're new to the channel, welcome in. Hopefully you're enjoying the content. And if you're new to the YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button. If you're new in audio form, hit that follow along and subscribe button there as well. We're free for you, regardless of how you're watching or listening, or if you're somewhere in the middle. Welcome back into the show. Now, some of the guys that I've been impressed with in the preseason, I think there's a long list. I think the first guy you got to mention is Trenton Simpson, right? He's been all over the place, making big plays, looks more than ready to step into a role for the Ravens this year and replace Patrick Queen. There are elements of his game that I think are already better than Patrick Queen, such as the run game. But also, I think to me, the pass coverage is a big one. The pass coverage is huge to me, where there are certain aspects Trenton is good in the run game and maybe is a little better than Patrick Queen. There are probably some aspects Queen is better in the run game than Trenton Simpson. But to me, the pass coverage is the big one, where that was always a weakness for Queen. But I feel like Trenton Simpson, we saw it in that second preseason game. That is a strength and 100% strength for me. Nate Wiggins in that Eagles game showed off everything and more that he needed to. I mean, it was a heck of a performance. He did exactly what he needed to. Exactly what he needed to. Then you have other guys. I mean, I've been pretty impressed overall with Andrew Voorhees. I mean, again, he's had some moments, hand placement issues, but I think generally first action in the NFL after taking that red shirt year, yeah, I think he's been pretty good. I think other players, Owen Wright, despite only having 8 carries for 9 yards in that second preseason game, he did have the reception touchdown, looked really good against Philadelphia. He, to me, is the leader in the clubhouse for the number 3 spot in terms of running back. wide receivers, Dayton Wade, Tylen Wallace, Malik Cunningham, Anthony Miller. I mean, all these guys are stepping up and making plays. I think it's probably going to come down, if they're keeping 6 wide receivers, it's probably going to come down to a 2 wide receiver battle between Tylen Wallace and Dayton Wade. What ends up happening with that? I don't really know. It might come down to, the last couple of who could make the big play type moments for those guys. On the defensive line, I mean, pass rusher, I guess, Odafe Owe showed a ton in that Atlanta game. And you saw Adisa Isaac do a lot of good things, although he's injured again. So that's pretty unfortunate. Other than that, Ardarius Washington's had a couple of nice plays. Pepe Williams has had a couple of nice plays. Bo Braid has looked all over the place, and he's certainly making a potential roster spot case. So they have a lot of stars here on both sides of the ball. We know that with Lamar, Roquan, et cetera, but their depth pieces are going to be so important to what they do. Now, in terms of the preseason game today, I'll make some predictions. So if you're watching before the game, again, we can kind of go through these together. If you're watching after the game, you can either tell me how right or wrong I was about them. I predict Owen Wright to have a bounce back game. I think he's going to do really well. I think the offensive line might struggle a little bit early, but will find their rhythm late. I think Josh Johnson will do enough. Again, not a perfect game like last time, but will do enough to make fans even more confident in him as the backup option. I think Emory Jones will outperform Devin Leary. I think, what wide receiver one should I do? I'm trying to think what I should do for wide receiver. I'm going to say Anthony Miller. Anthony Miller leads the team in receptions, and Keith Kirkwood leads the Ravens in yards, with Tylen Wallace being a second, Dayton Wade being third. That's what I'm going to go there. I think Kadir Ismail makes a couple of plays as a tight end. I think Joe Evans has a nice day. If Josh Ross is able to play, I'm not exactly sure of the status, but if Josh Ross is able to play, I think he has a big game. I don't think Trenton Simpson plays. I think that Ardarius Washington solidifies a roster spot. I think Bo Braid makes a huge case again for a spot. I think Bump Cooper does some good stuff. And I think Pepe Williams has another sack, 3 in 3 preseason games. I think Pepe Williams, 3 sacks off the edge in 3 preseason games. That's going to be what I go there. Are there any other positions I missed? Defensive line, I guess. I think Brent Urban plays a decent amount. I think Josh Tuopo makes a play or 2, and he solidifies his spot on the practice squad. I think that's it. I might be missing somebody, maybe a guy or 2. I'm trying to go through very quickly. I don't think so. I think that's all I have for predictions for today. So again, if you're watching beforehand, this is kind of a sneak peek of what a game day episode will be. Is 6 a.m. It'll come out, the episode, and we'll go through predictions, talk about storylines and whatnot. And then if you're watching after the game, you can tell me how wrong or right I was. That's kind of the fun part of the whole situation here. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you back here later today, though. We're going to be going live after the game. So be sure to stay tuned. We are your Ravens post-game destination here on Locked On Ravens. So be sure to subscribe, follow along, turn notifications on, video form, audio form, however you listen, however you watch. I really appreciate all the support here. And we have a ton of Ravens content coming your way this season. So again, coming up later today, we will have a post-game live reaction stream right here on this channel. So be sure to stay tuned. We'll see you right back here later today on Locked On Ravens.